Hello, everyone. I'm Kareem Al-Assal. I'm the Director of Policy at CanadaVisa. Thank you very much for joining us today for this webinar on the 6 new permanent residence streams available to essential workers and international graduates here in Canada. As you all know, there is enormous demand for these streams given that Canada has hundreds of thousands of essential workers and international graduates who want to remain here as permanent residents. And as such, Campbell Cohen and CanadaVisa decided to host this webinar so that we can assist as many of you as possible so that you can hopefully benefit from these streams. Since the streams were announced by Immigration Minister Marco Mendicino a couple of weeks ago, we at Campbell Cohen and CanadaVisa have aimed to provide as much information as possible to help you get started in terms of preparing your submissions come May 6th. And what we've done is we've tried to provide as much information as we can through the likes of cicnews.com, canadavisa.com, as well as through our newsletter and our social media channels. We're also very proud of the fact that just 2 days after the programs were announced, we were the first in the Canadian immigration space to launch a free assessment tool dedicated for these 6 streams. The tool is available to you, again, for free on canadavisa.com/essential. What we ask you to do is to spend just 2 minutes of your time providing us with basic information so that we can provide you with instant notification in terms of whether it appears that you meet the eligibility criteria of the new streams. If you have any follow-up questions about your specific case, we invite you to correspond with a member of our Campbell Cohen law firm team. So after you complete the assessment and it appears that you meet the eligibility criteria, a member of our team will reach out to you to offer their assistance. Now, in terms of what you can expect during this webinar, Attorney Stephen Sherman, who's going to be presenting, and I are going based off of the same information that you have available to you, which is the information that IRCC provided on their website a couple of weeks ago. In addition to that information, IRCC held a technical briefing with the Canadian Bar Association last week, and it stated, which is usually the case prior to the launch of a new immigration program, that IRCC will be releasing an application guide on its website very shortly. So in the meantime, Attorney Stephen Sherman and I are going to be going based on the information we have at our disposal. It's still a bit limited. The information is subject to change, but in the meantime, following this webinar, continue to engage with us at Campbell Cohen and via CanadaVisa and our newsletter so that we can provide you with the latest updates. One of the things we're also going to do is as soon as IRCC releases the application guide on our website, we'll send an update via our newsletter so that you can be as prepared as possible in advance of the application intake opening on May the 6th. Now for this webinar, Attorney Stephen Sherman is going to present for about 15 minutes or so. He'll provide an overview of why Canada launched these special streams, as well as he'll speak about the general eligibility criteria. We want to spend most of the webinar answering your questions. So if you have any general questions about the programs, we're happy to answer them. Again, for specific questions, we ask that you keep them aside and you correspond with us afterwards via email and via telephone. Now, in terms of how you can pose your questions, please submit them on the chat box on your screens. We've also received a lot of great questions from you via email, so we're looking forward to answering as many of them as possible after Stephen's short presentation. So our speaker is, of course, attorney Stephen Sherman. In his role at Campbell Cohen, Stephen specializes in helping clients obtain permanent and temporary residence in Canada. He is an expert on federal and provincial immigration pathways, and Stephen often gives presentations to human resource professionals and employers about how to navigate Canada's immigration system. Stephen is a graduate of the University of Ottawa's Faculty of Law, and he's also a member of the Barreau de Quebec and Canadian Bar Association. So without further ado, let me pass things over to attorney Stephen Sherman.
Thank you for that, Kareem. So yes, I'm here today to discuss the new PR pathways that were recently announced on April 14th, which Kareem spoke about. These are the most recent concrete demonstrations of the immigration goals announced by IRCC for the next few years. These goals were set forth largely as a result of the impact the coronavirus has had on the level of Canadian immigration over this past year. So for example, for 2020, the total number of new Canadian permanent residents was only 185,000, which was down from 340,000 the preceding year. So that's quite a drop, and that represents the lowest level of Canadian immigration in over 20 years, since about 1998. So in response to this, the IRCC recently announced that it intends on welcoming over 1.2 million new immigrants to Canada over the course of the next 3 years. So the introduction of these new pathways does make sense when you consider Canada's understandably ambitious immigration goals. It also makes sense to focus on those foreign nationals who are already in Canada, just in light of the conditions brought about by the coronavirus pandemic. Because many foreign nationals are either unable or unwilling to travel to Canada at this time, it's only logical to prioritize those candidates who are currently already residing in Canada and have Canadian experience. Canada's immigration minister has in fact explicitly stated that efforts will be focused on finding routes for temporary residents in Canada to transition to permanent residency. So these new pathways are a clear illustration of this. So what are these new streams? So for those applicants who don't necessarily speak French, IRCC will be accepting a total of approximately 90,000 applications, which are divided up as follows. So we have 20,000 applications through the PR pathway for healthcare workers, 30,000 applications for the PR pathway for workers in other essential occupations, and we have another one, PR pathways for international graduates, for which they'll accept 40,000 applications. So there's also corresponding French programs which don't, the criteria is the same, they just don't include any quota. So the programs are open from May 6th to, sorry, I think I just got lost with the slides a little bit. Sorry about that, guys. So anyways, the programs are open from May 6th to November 5th, 2021. However, as I mentioned, the English-speaking pathways could close sooner than that if and when the limit of applications is reached. So first, we have the PR pathway for healthcare workers, for which, as I said, they'll be accepting about 20,000 applications. For this program, the applicant needs to have experience in a profession relating to healthcare, a list of which IRCC has provided in Annex A. And this work experience must be at least 1 year of full-time work, or it could be equivalent amounts in part-time work. It needs to total at least 1,560 hours, and this work experience must have been accumulated in the 3 years prior to the date on which the application is submitted. It's important to note that for this work experience, the work experience doesn't need to all have been accumulated in the same occupation. So if an individual has experience in 2 or more jobs listed in Annex A, then the length of time of this experience can be combined for the purposes of satisfying the 1,560 hour requirement. But both jobs must be explicitly listed as part of Annex A so that they can be combined. You also need to be legally employed at the time that the application is submitted. However, the employment for this purpose does not need to be one of the occupations listed in Annex A. So it doesn't need to be related to healthcare, nor does it have to be skilled employment, in fact. So it could also be part-time or full-time work. It does need to be legally authorized work. So that means you're either working on a valid work permit, or you've applied for a work permit, or you're otherwise eligible to work legally in Canada when you apply. One important thing to take note of, both for the work experience that you have to accumulate and the your current employment, is that it can't be self-employed. This means that you can't be working for your own account. The applicant needs to be able to demonstrate an employer-employee relationship in both the work experience and the current employment. Self-employed work experience is excluded from many Canadian immigration programs, largely because there's already a specific program that targets those type of applicants, and that's the case for these new pathways as well. So you must have a language proficiency of at least benchmark 4 in either of Canada's official languages, English or French, and this proficiency must be demonstrated by one of Canada's accepted language tests. So it's typically the IELTS General or CELPIP for English and the TEF for French. You must be physically in Canada when the application is submitted and when it's ultimately approved, meaning one way or another you should maintain legal status while in Canada throughout the processing times. You must intend to live outside of Quebec. So these pathways are not Quebec immigration programs. So when utilizing these pathways, the applicant has to demonstrate the intention to live outside of the province of Quebec. This is, of course, accomplished most easily by working and residing outside of Quebec. However, if this is not the case and you do live in Quebec, you can still apply. You just need to be able to firmly demonstrate your intention to live outside of Quebec once your permanent residency is approved, or ideally even before that. So this is going to be a subjective assessment by the immigration officer, so each case is going to be different. But what they typically want to see in terms of demonstrating this intention is connections outside of Quebec. So things like having a residence outside of Quebec, like purchasing a property or renting a property, or a firm job offer outside of Quebec, accompanied, of course, by any supporting documentation or paperwork. That could go a long way to demonstrating that intention. But ultimately, this is an assessment that is at the discretion of the immigration officer. So the application will be an online application. Further details about the mechanisms involved in applying and the method through which documents are provided, those should be forthcoming. And lastly, you need to be admissible to Canada. So this applies both from a criminal and a medical standpoint. In the majority of cases, this shouldn't be an issue, as any potential applicant is already in Canada, just by virtue of the nature of these new pathways. However, it is possible in certain scenarios that an individual could be inadmissible to Canada, but also currently living here under a temporary resident permit, which is a permit that allows you to be in Canada temporarily despite being inadmissible. So for these particular individuals, if they fulfill the criteria, they would need to apply for criminal rehabilitation before they apply, or at the same time as they apply. And if they're not eligible to apply for that yet, then they wouldn't be able to apply for these programs. Now, this is not specific to these new programs. It's just general rules pertaining to inadmissibility that are applying here. So if anybody listening has any further questions about that and they want to discuss their particular case, just feel free to contact us directly. So next we have the same program, but for French-speaking individuals, the PR pathway for French-speaking healthcare workers. So like I said, the eligibility criteria is all identical aside from the language proficiency, of course. So here for this program, you need to be able to demonstrate the language benchmark of 4 in French in order to be a good candidate for this program. So next we have the PR pathway for workers in other essential occupations. So here again, you have very similar eligibility criteria to the other pathways. You need to be currently living and employed in Canada. You need to have the intention of residing outside of Quebec. It's the same language proficiency requirements, and you must not be inadmissible to Canada. The only difference here really pertains to the work experience that needs to be demonstrated. So for this pathway, the experience must have been accumulated in an occupation listed in another annex, Annex B, which contains jobs that are still deemed essential by IRCC, though they don't pertain directly to the healthcare field. Another difference here is that for this pathway, you can combine work experience from both Annex B, which is the one specific to this pathway, with work experience from Annex A, which are the healthcare occupations. So this is different from the healthcare pathway, for which all the work necessarily needed to have been accumulated under Annex A, which are those dealing exclusively with the healthcare occupations. But here, on the other hand, you can mix and match experiences from both Annex A, which is the healthcare, and Annex B, which is other essential workers, to make up that 1 year, or that 1,560 hours of work. And it also needs to be demonstrated within the same time frame, so within 3 years prior to the date of submission. Before I move on, just one other thing I wanted to add. It's the same situation here with regard to the current employment for the work in the essential occupations. The current employment, it doesn't need to be like one of the jobs listed in Annex B, so it doesn't need to be an essential occupation. It doesn't need to be full-time. So it's exactly the same as the previous one. And here we have again the same program, but for French-speaking individuals. Again, all the same criteria aside from the language proficiency. Just as an aside, the French version of these pathways, they're actually instituted by IRCC as a way to encourage the development of more francophone communities outside of Quebec. So that's why even for French-speaking people, they still need to demonstrate the intention to leave Quebec or live outside of Quebec once the permanent residency is granted. So next we have the PR pathway for international graduates, which is for individuals who have graduated from a Canadian school relatively recently, no earlier than January 2017 is the cutoff date. The school needs to be a designated learning institution. So you need to ensure that the institution at which you study has a DLI number. You need to have finished your program and have been granted the education credential following completion. So you must have been awarded your degree or diploma before you start the application. And you must also you've been fully authorized to study throughout the course of the program. So that means that you maintain legal status throughout your studies. There was no gap in your studies for which your study permit was not valid. You need to have been studying legally throughout the whole academic program. And the rest of the criteria listed here is identical to the other programs, with the exception of the language requirement. For this pathway, the applicant must demonstrate a proficiency of a little bit higher, a language benchmark of at least 5, whereas for the other pathway, that level was 4. But everything else is identical with regard to being employed, having the intention of leaving Quebec, living in Canada. So that's all the same. And lastly, we have the international graduate pathway for French-speaking applicants, which again is the same program as for the English speakers exactly, aside from, of course, the language proficiency. Here, you're going to have your French language proficiency assessed through one of those tests. So yeah, that's the only difference. So yeah, that about sums up that gives a broad overview of the different programs and a little bit of the eligibility criteria for these programs. As Kareem alluded to in the beginning, we have a free eligibility tool. It's very quick to fill out. It gives you, an accurate assessment of whether or not you're a good candidate for it. And yeah, just do that. And if you want to be in touch with us after you get the results, we're happy to help and move forward with the process. And I think Kareem now is going to field some of your questions, so I'm happy to address those. Kareem, I think your audio might be off.
Thanks a lot, Stephen. How do I sound now?
My pleasure. You sound better. I'm just going to turn mine on.
I might start singing soon. So we want to spend the bulk of the webinar fielding your questions. You've already posed a lot of them in the chat box. Please continue to do so. Again, just to stress, we can answer general questions about the eligibility criteria. For any specific questions about your own case, please contact us And the first step is by completing the assessment tool that we have available on CanadaVisa.com/essential. So let's go ahead with the questions. I'll run through as many of these as I can. Stephen, we have a question here from Vivian. She just completed her program here in Canada. Congratulations, Vivian. She's gone ahead and applied for her PGWP. She still hasn't been approved for the PGWP. In the meantime, can she go ahead and submit an application under these streams beginning on May 6th?
Yeah, absolutely. Just the fact that your application is pending, that's okay. You're legally authorized to work full-time right after you submit the application for the post-grad work permit. So assuming that she fulfills the criteria with regard to the experience that needs to be demonstrated in the previous 3 years, like the 1 year, then yes, her working out does fulfill the requirement of being currently employed in Canada.
Excellent. Halita wants to know, while I was a student, I was working in an essential occupation part-time. Can I count that work experience towards the requirements under one of the essential worker streams?
So she was working part-time while she was a student, the 20 hours a week, right?
All I got here is that she was working part-time while she was a student.
Okay, so yeah, you're able to work 20 hours a week part-time as a student. We do think that would make you eligible because you can combine the part-time. Like I said, it's the 1,560 hours. That's the important number you have to reach, and you can combine part-time works to make that total. That's one of the things that we require, like further clarification from IRCC, just because for certain programs, work while you're a student, it might not count. So we just need to wait for the program to fully open to get further clarification on that before I could answer that definitively.
Varun wants to know whether he can go ahead and submit applications under the international graduate and essential worker streams at the same time.
Yes, you can. There's no issue there. They don't conflict with one another. The only thing is that you do have to pay twice the application fee. But aside from that, there's no issue in joining more than one programs.
So Cheryl would like to know, what is IRCC likely going to request for me to provide evidence of my work experience in Canada?
So sorry, can you just repeat that last question? I think you were on mute by accident. Sorry about that.
Cheryl wants to know, generally speaking, what sort of proof will IRCC require so that I can demonstrate my work experience here in Canada?
So they haven't released like the document checklist where they're going to specify details like that. Right now, we're going on that they're going to follow the same guidelines that are in place right now for permanent residency. So typically, it's stuff like work experience letters that outline what your what your job was, what your duties and responsibilities were, and stuff like that. That's typically what they go on now in terms of getting credit for your Canadian work experience. But again, we I have to add the big caveat that we need to wait for final guidelines and final instructions from IRCC, which will most likely get closer to when the program opens.
Vishnu completed their educational program in Quebec, and recently moved to Ontario 45 days ago. He wants to know how he can demonstrate to IRCC his intention to reside outside of Quebec.
So, like I said, that's a bit of it's totally subjective. Like, it's up to the immigration officer to determine whether or not he basically believes that the applicant has that intention. And each case is different. So nobody's going to have, identical documents to demonstrate the intention. But typically it's anything that shows that you're going to be, living and working outside of Quebec. So any documentation that you could show to the effect that you have, like a residence outside of Quebec, that you're acquiring one, or a rental agreement or anything like that, or a firm job offer that indicates that the place of employment is outside of Quebec. That's typically what they want to see. All those things could go a long way in terms of demonstrating the intention. But that assessment is left ultimately to the discretion of the reviewing immigration officer.
Allison asks a very common question. We've been receiving this a lot. She's already submitted a PMP paper-based application. She's wondering if she can go ahead and apply under these new streams. And just to add to her question, others have asked something similar along the lines of, I've already uploaded my Express Entry profile. Can I go ahead and apply under these streams as well?
Yes, you can. Again, you will have to pay like twice the application fees. You're going to have to pay an application fee for each program you pursue. So yeah, there's no impediment to doing that. We're not quite sure what the processing times are going to be for these new programs. Like so far, we're going on the assessment. They're going to be like about 6 months, which is what they say the processing times are for permanent residency. It might be a bit longer. So I'm not sure why they would want to do like multiple programs if they've already submitted, but there's nothing preventing them from doing that.
Dr. Tunde Sanmanu is an international graduate here in Canada. His wife and 2 kids are overseas. Can he add his wife and 2 kids as dependents on his application? I'm not sure if you can answer the second part of the question, but I'll ask it anyways. Which is that, do you recommend he go ahead and add them as dependents, or should he just sponsor them separately?
So, and his family members, you said, are outside of Canada? Okay. Yeah, so they can be included as accompanying dependents, I believe. I don't believe the 4 national needs to be in Canada at the time of application. So yes, I do think he can be included in the application as a dependent.
Okay. So Smitha asked a question. I believe, Stephen, we're awaiting more information from this from IRCC, but because it's a common question, I'll raise it anyways. Mm-hmm. Can my language test results be submitted to IRCC after I submit my application?
Okay, so yeah, that's really basically the big question, because a lot of people are, of course, anxious to apply for this program, and like it's been difficult to get testing dates, so a lot of people might not have their English language results. So right now we're operating on the premise that they would be required at the outset. But again, this is really the big question, and really the big thing that we're waiting on answers from IRCC. So, like I said, as of now, we're operating on the assumption that they would be required. Like, you need to have valid English language results when you submit the application, meaning they're less than 2 years old.
Cheryl, Raza, and many of our other viewers have a similar question with respect to both police clearance certificates as well as medical exams. Mm-hmm. Do we know yet, Stephen, at what stage IRCC will require both the clearance certificates as well as a medical clearance?
So the police certificates and other documents that may be more difficult to obtain, there's going to be some possibility to submit them later. The onus is going to be on the client to prove that reasonable efforts were made to obtain some of those documents, like the police clearances. So they're going to want to see that they ordered them or whatever. But yeah, they will be given the opportunity to provide those at a later date.
A few of our viewers have asked a similar question, which is along the lines, Stephen, of I've lived in Canada for 4, 5, 6 years. Do I still need to complete an English language test? So
yes, you do need to show valid English language results, even if you're fully proficient in English. It's the same thing as for Express Entry. You do have to show valid language results.
Pavneet asks, for me to go ahead and submit an application under the international graduate stream, does my work experience in Canada need to fall under one of the essential worker annexes, or the one of the occupations listed under the 2 annexes?
No, so those are separate pathways. It's an either-or type situation. You could be eligible for both or either of them. So if she just is eligible, on the premise that she's graduated since January 2017, then no, the work experience doesn't need to be in any of those annexes.
Sai wants to know, I live in Quebec. Can I go ahead and apply?
Yeah, you can apply, but that's just that kind of dicey situation where you have to manifest the intention of leaving Quebec. So you can apply from within Quebec. If it's like an international, if we're talking about the graduate pathway, you could have graduated from Quebec. The work experience could have been accumulated in Quebec for the other programs. You just have to be able to show the intention of leaving Quebec, and it's going to be at the discretion of the immigration officer as to whether or not he believes that intention. Like I explained before, ideally they'd like to see stuff like anything about residences or work outside of Quebec, but it's always up to them.
Agam wants to know, do I need to be employed at the time of my application under the international graduate stream?
Yes, you do need to be employed under that one as well.
And a follow-up question that others have asked Stephen is, does my employment need to be full-time when I submit my application?
No, it doesn't need to be full-time. It could be part-time. There's no requirement to that effect.
So we don't know the answer to this question yet, but I'll raise it anyways because it's on the minds of many of our viewers. Okay. Stephen Dev wants to know, what docs will I need to submit on May the 6th?
Well, yeah, that's basically the big question. Like, we're waiting on a document checklist. Like, we're waiting on a bunch of stuff, like with regard to how to claim credit for the education credentials. We don't know the details with regard to that. If you actually need like a copy of the education credentials or any other documents, manifesting completion of the program. So that's really the big question that, like, I'm sure we'll post an article about that right away when we have any indication. That's more your department, but yeah, that's kind of up in the air right now at the moment.
Asad is an international student here. He's obtained work experience that he believes will make him eligible under the essential worker streams. Can he go ahead and apply under one of those streams with a study permit, or does he need to obtain a work permit?
No, he could be on a study permit as long as, because you could work for 20 hours a week if you're a full-time student on a study permit. So if he's employed, that will fulfill the criteria of being employed at the time of the application.
We don't know the answer to this yet, but a lot of our student viewers are asking it. Generally speaking, Stephen, what sort of proof that does IRCC require to demonstrate that a student has completed their program here in Canada?
Yeah, so that's the uncertain part. Like, typically they like to see like ideally a copy of the degree. So yeah, like the copy of the credential, it might be mandatory. Like we might have to see a copy of the degree, the diploma, or the certificate. We don't know if we need like a letter confirming graduation. There haven't been clear instructions provided yet. We do encourage all people, like ideally, to get a copy of the credential. Like that's in a best case scenario, that's what they would have. But yet, clear guidelines haven't been released to that effect yet.
Mohammed works in 2 different places. He believes that he's eligible under the international graduate stream. Does he need to provide his proof of employment in the 2 occupations, or is one sufficient?
I would say one is sufficient. Again, like the detailed guidelines haven't been released, but the requirement is that you just be employed, and it's not even specific as to the skill level of the employment or to whether it's part-time or full-time. Definitely not contingent on holding 2 jobs. So I don't think you'd have to get proof of both employments. So yeah, I think just the one would be necessary.
A few viewers ask, will I be able to go ahead and apply under the international graduate stream if I am graduating from my Canadian DLI later this year? So let's say in the spring, summer, or even in the fall.
Well, that depends really on what happens with regard to the quotas. Like, we don't know how quickly it's going to fill up. Honestly, like, I'm sure that's a question that many of your viewers have been posing, and we were going to get to eventually. How quick it's going to fill up. So we don't know how quick it's going to fill up. Like, there's been, of course, a lot of interest in this program. There might be many applicants that don't have all the documentary requirements right now. Like maybe some people don't have language results, so maybe it won't fill up like as soon as we think, but it can potentially fill up pretty quickly. I think she does need to have, her education credential completed and under her belt before she applies. So she can't apply before she has that. It's just a matter of whether or not, there'll still be spaces available and open when she's ready, assuming, of course, she doesn't speak French and can't demonstrate that, and therefore, be exempt from the quotas.
Apurva asks a question that many people have already sent to us via email. Do I need to get an educational credential assessment and submit it as part of my application under the streams?
So no, I don't believe so. Like for these streams, like person's going to be in Canada, so education credential assessments, those are typically used to determine the Canadian equivalent of education credentials obtained outside of Canada. So that wouldn't really apply in these cases, I don't believe.
Sun asks, can I go ahead and begin to complete the generic immigration application form on IRCC's website, or do I need to wait until May the 6th to begin to complete it?
So yeah, IMM008, like that's just a typical generic application form. It's included in many immigration applications. So it most likely will be required for the application. It will be required when the application is submitted. But yeah, again, the guidelines haven't been released and the exact documentary requirements haven't been released. So I don't know if I would suggest, filling out forms before the full instructions have been laid out.
Ghazi's in a PhD program. They graduated from a master's program here in Canada. Can they go ahead and apply under the international graduate stream?
Yeah, so you said that their first education credential they completed in Canada as well, right?
A master's, yeah.
Yeah, so as long as they're currently working, and like we specified in an earlier question, they could be working for up to 20 hours on their study permit, then yes, they would be eligible for that program.
One question that's been asked, I believe I'm eligible under the international graduate stream. However, due to lockdowns, my hours have been recently cut. Is that going to affect my eligibility under the stream?
No, as long as you're still working, like you're still employed and you're not on like leave or anything, as long as you're still employed at least part-time, regardless of the extent to which your hours have been cut, then you do satisfy the condition to be currently employed in Canada. So if they're otherwise eligible, then their hours haven't been cut, wouldn't be an impediment to applying.
Someone here asks, I've been working more than 30 hours a week in my occupation in Canada. Can I count additional hours beyond the 30 per week towards the 1,560-hour requirement?
So we think so. That's a bit uncertain. I think he's alluding to the like the CEC work experience requirements. I think you will be able to include it more than 30 hours a week. Like I think you could just include like however much you've been working. The important thing is to get that 1,560 hours. But yeah, that hasn't been, we said, no certainty there yet.
Vinadreep, sorry for mispronouncing the name. Vinamradreep wants to know whether IRCC will require the application fees be paid upfront or whether they can be paid later on.
Yeah, we do think they would need to be paid upfront. We're not exactly certain of the fees. We've heard they're going to be about the either the same or maybe even a bit lower than the traditional program. But yeah, they do need to be paid upfront, including the application fee and the right of permanent residence fee as well.
Agam wants to know if I'm not able to get a letter from my employer demonstrating that I work there, will pay stubs be sufficient, or generally speaking, are pay stubs sufficient?
So yeah, again, that's like the documentary requirements that aren't exactly clear yet. If we're going on like the same guidelines that apply to Canadian Experience class and documenting the work experience required for that program, then you would need to have a letter from your employer laying out, your occupation, duties and responsibilities, your remuneration, your hours of work, the period for which you worked. So if it's the same type of instructions, then I would think you would need the letter, but again, not absolutely certain.
Cheryl asks, due to COVID, I'm not able to renew my recently expired passport. Can I submit my application nonetheless with an explanation explaining why my passport has expired?
So yeah, that's another document question. We just have to wait and see, and I think it's going to be at their discretion whether or not they want to accept that. Like typically for all immigration applications, you should have a valid passport, and you can provide a letter of explanation as well as proof that she's applied to renew it, and put forth efforts to try to get a new one. But yeah, we would need to get the document checklist for this particular program in order to confirm.
One of the questions is, do you think the quota will be met quickly, and how can I prepare in advance of May 6th?
So yeah, so the quota being met quickly, that's really, like I said before, like that's not really certain. All I know is we have received like a lot of interest in this program. There are a lot of people in Canada whose interest has been piqued by these multiple pathways. But yeah, I can't tell for certain how quickly they'll fill up. Like I said, maybe a lot of people that are interested and want to apply don't have like all the necessary documentation right off the bat, which again, we're not absolutely sure of because the detailed list of documentation hasn't been released yet. So, we hope it doesn't fill up too quick and that a lot of people get the opportunity to apply, but it's not really certain. In terms of like being prepared, just basically getting what we've discussed already so far today ready, like ideally a copy of your education credential, like the actual copy of the degree, certificate, or diploma, something that shows that you're currently working. If you're doing through one of the working pathways, something that a letter that documents the fact that you have the required 1,560 hours of work. So stuff like that. But yeah, we can't be, in terms of preparing in advance, you can't really be too proactive without having the full list of all the documents that are required.
Question here is, does my work experience need to be continuous for me to be eligible under one of the essential worker streams?
No, it doesn't need to be continuous. It could be in bits and pieces, and you could add it up to get that total amount. It does need to, like, all the work needs to be in one of the relevant occupations. But yeah, there's no issue with attaching several different periods of work together to make up that 1,560 hour period.
Garima is very insistent with this question. I believe we've answered it already. Do I need to submit my language test score up front?
That's the $1 million question that we're all wondering, and we're all, right now, like I said, we're operating on the premise that they're required up front. We're hoping maybe they make some allowances or something, because we are getting a lot of calls from people that do really want to participate and are clearly proficient in English. They just need to have that demonstrated to the satisfaction of IRCC, which is done through these language results. So as of now, like, we're operating on the premise that they are required. But yeah, we need to wait for further instructions from IRCC, and hopefully they'll make some exceptions or allowances, but we really don't know.
Generally speaking, Stephen, how far back does one need to go to get police clearance certificates?
So, like, anywhere in the past 10 years you've lived for at least 6 months, you should have a police clearance for. So yeah, it's typically any place you've lived for at least 6 months, you should get a police clearance for.
I believe we've answered this already. Under the international graduate stream, is there a minimum number of hours that I need to work to be eligible?
And if you're talking about in terms of, so no, not if you're talking about international graduate, no, not in terms of like accumulated work experience or in terms of the hours, you're currently working to show you're currently employed in Canada. There's no requirement to that effect.
I believe this has been asked already. A question here is IELTS academic accepted by IRCC for PR applications?
So typically not. Typically they want to see the IELTS general. Again, I have to give that big caveat about how we don't have the document checklist or the guidelines. But right now we're assuming that with regard to language proficiency, it's going to follow the same requirements as general PR, like express entry, and academic IELTS isn't accepted for that.
Do we have an idea yet, Stephen, of IRCC's processing standard for the streams?
Not really. I think you mentioned at the beginning there was that that technical briefing. I think somebody mentioned there that they're striving to keep it at the same like processing level in terms of time as Canadian Experience class, which the posted processing times, like what they say, is about 6 months. It could be a bit longer these days because of COVID. Everything's kind of up in the air in terms of processing times because of COVID. But for right now, the best information we have is they're striving to meet the same processing times as for Canadian Experience class.
One of our viewers asked, I recently received an invitation to apply under the CEC through Express Entry. I've already submitted my permanent residence application. Can I apply to this as well?
You can, but again, you just have to pay twice the fees. And since they're, like I just said, since they're striving for the same processing time as CEC, I don't really see the point of submitting another application when you already have one for CEC submitted and already in processing. It would just stand to reason based on that the CEC one, you'd receive an answer for that one first. But there's nothing preventing you from applying for that program as well.
Bavesh starts a new job on May the 3rd. They're wondering if starting the job so close to the launch of the programs will make them eligible under the international graduate stream.
Yeah, so it's not a problem. There's no requirement to the effect of like having had to have been employed for a certain period of time or having a certain number of months of experience under your belt. There's no requirement to that effect. So you could hypothetically you could have joined on the same day and you could still be eligible for the program through the international graduate.
Sai asks actually a fairly common question, which is, does one need to upload an Express Entry profile to go ahead and submit an application beginning May 6th through these streams?
So no, these are separate for Express Entry, so it's a separate application mechanism. It's not a program that's encompassed within Express Entry. It's its own public policy. So no, an Express Entry profile wouldn't be required for this.
Sai also asked, do dependents need to complete an IELTS or a CELPIP?
So no, it's not. It's the primary applicant whose English proficiency needs to be demonstrated. It's not based on the proficiency of any of the accompanying dependents.
We have a question here. I was self-employed in an essential occupation while studying in Canada. Can this work experience count towards the 1,560-hour work requirement under one of the essential worker streams?
So no, if you're self-employed, that doesn't count. And like I said in my presentation, like self-employed programs, like self-employed applicants, they go under their own program called the self-employed program. So self-employed work is usually excluded from Canada's economic immigration programs, and these pathways don't appear to be any exception.
Arnaz works at a restaurant, but unfortunately was temporarily laid off due to COVID. However, they still have a letter from their workplace stating that they are employed and they will be returning to work once lockdown restrictions are lifted. He wants to know, will he be considered employed in time for the program launch on May 6th?
So no, I don't believe so, unfortunately. Based on the technical briefing we attended a few days ago, um, what they mean by employment, it means that you're currently actually like work, like you're at work working. So you must be actively working at the time the application is submitted. You should be working and being paid. So just being on any sort of leave, like either maternity leave or in this case, I think you said a COVID-related leave, um, based on the initial indications, that wouldn't constitute current employment for the purposes of these programs.
Vidisha wants to know, has IRCC said anything yet about candidates needing to demonstrate proof of funds when they submit their applications?
I don't believe we've received indication to that effect. I think that's something we're still waiting on definitively to hear from IRCC.
Pradeep wants to know if there's going to be a ranking system for applications, or how is the process going to work?
So no, it's not ranking system. As far as we know right now, it's like on a first come, first serve basis type thing. So you're not ranked once you're in the program. They're accepting applications until they reach their quota. Or if you're French speaking, they'll just accept applications throughout the period for which the pathways are open, which is May 6th to November 5th.
A number of our viewers have asked, can I submit an application while I'm currently on maintained status, formerly known as implied status?
So yeah, that's not a problem. Like I said, the most often example of this happening is if somebody applies for the postgrad work permit and they're waiting for that application to be approved, then they'd be considered on implied status. Like even if their study permit expires, they're still in implied status by virtue of the fact that they submitted a work permit application while they still had valid status. So, and you're able to work when you're on implied status. So working during that period, that would satisfy the employment condition for being eligible. So yes, they should be able to apply even if they're on implied status.
Okay, Deep has asked this question about 50 times. It's a question that is on everyone's mind, including our own. Do we know yet, Stephen, what time IRCC is going to launch the application portal on their website on May 6th?
What time? No, I don't believe so. Sometimes he is right. I guess sometimes that is the difference maker for certain programs. You have to be quick. But yeah, we don't know the specific time as to when it's going to be available to apply. I don't believe, unless you've heard something that I haven't, but I don't think we have indication to that effect.
We have a user or a viewer that asks, my IELTS score expires on or in September. So I believe what they mean is that 2 years will have elapsed come September. Do they need to complete another IELTS to go ahead and submit an application beginning next week?
No, I don't believe so. Based on like the way immigration applications are treated, aside from this program, then the date of validity, date on which it's important to be valid, is the date on which you submit the application. So as long as it's valid when she submits, which it sounds like it will be, then she's good to go in that respect.
Evan wants to know, will applications be required to be submitted on CIC's website, or is there another website?
For that, I think like the exact mechanisms and ways of applying, I don't think we're fully aware of those yet. And like the methods of providing documentation, like I don't think that's been released yet. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure about that.
Generally speaking, Stephen, how does one submit their language test score to IRCC?
I think that depends on like what application you're pursuing, like whether if it's an electronic application for permanent residency, it's one way. This I think is going to be online, but yeah, that's another detail and like method of document provision that hasn't been explicitly laid out, I don't believe yet, by IRCC.
This question has come up a few times. So we have a few of our viewers who are currently outside of Canada for whatever reason. So actually one of the reasons is that some of our viewers are currently in India and Pakistan, And as you know, Stephen, a few days ago, Canada announced new travel restrictions on those two countries over the next 30 days. Can they nonetheless go ahead and submit their applications beginning next week?
So no, I don't believe so. Like there haven't been any exceptions released, addressing this issue. I do understand it's very unfortunate. Of course, it's outside of their control, the fact that the flights were banned. But as of now, like one of the requirements is that the person be physically present in Canada. And also as of now, they haven't released any exception to that requirement pertaining to the recent restrictions that were put into effect for India and Pakistan.
So thanks a lot, Stephen. You were amazing as usual. I'd like to thank all of you for participating in this webinar. We had thousands of participants. Now, in terms of what you can expect next, this webinar was recorded. We'll be sending you an email very shortly with the recording of the webinar, as well as with the slide deck that Stephen spoke to. We'll also invite you once again to complete our free tool on CanadaVisa.com/essential. Again, it only takes 2 minutes of your time. And the benefits of completing the tool is that you'll learn on the spot whether it appears you're eligible for the new streams. And we'll also reach out to you via our Cohen Immigration Law Firm to offer any assistance so that we can help you be as prepared as possible come May 6th so that you can hopefully benefit from these new streams, obtain permanent residence, and settle as you look to building your life here in Canada. Again, we also strongly encourage you to sign up to our newsletter on cicnews.com. As more information becomes available between now and May 6th with respect to language testing availability, the application guide from IRCC, and other important information, we are going to push it out on cicnews.com, as well as release any major breaking stories through our newsletter. If you have any specific questions about your case, again, complete the tool on our website. If you've already used the tool, continue to correspond with the Cohen Immigration Law Firm representative that has reached out to you. We're very keen on assisting as many of you as possible. So please continue to remain in touch, and we'll do our best to assist you. With all that being said, I'd like to thank you once again. And I'll turn things over to Stephen so that he can provide any final remarks and so that we can go ahead and close the webinar.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kareem. So thank you everybody for listening. I hope it was helpful. Again, we're operating on limited information. We don't know the full picture. We don't have the full scope of all the instructions that have been released yet. Anything said here doesn't constitute legal advice. It's just telling you, we're happy to answer questions and go on the best of what we know right now. So I hope it was helpful. And like Kareem said, if any of you guys have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to our law firm. You could write to us, you could take our assessment. And we're happy to discuss the way forward with you guys. And thank you for listening.
Thanks again. And thank you, Stephen.
My pleasure.